a lot of things going on constantly in response to whatever you're doing. Your genes instruct those jobs, how efficiently you do them. So if you have a bad version of a gene, you know, I don't do this job so well. So it's not about a gene equals cancer or a gene equals Alzheimer's. It's more like a gene equals a bad job or a good job. And I can now start to interpret why I feel the way I feel if you put in between those two things my habits.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode.
Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. My guest today is KASHIF KHAN, and we're going to be talking about how we can use the information we get from our genetics to create something which he likes to call precision medicine, very specific ways of optimizing the health of an individual based on genetic predisposition. But first, I'd like to invite you to visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com. Over there, you can listen to episodes, read synopses, see photos of my guests, read a little bio on myself. There's also a YouTube channel where you can listen. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. As I said, my guest today is KASHIF KHAN. KASHIF has a company called the DNA Company, and he has written a book called The DNA Way, which explains his own journey with having a number of chronic conditions that he was not able to resolve. And some of these conditions were prevalent in his family and his family history. And he became very curious as to why this was so and how he could heal himself, because the doctors were not really doing that. They were just basically saying, well, you have this and here's a pill. And he wanted more information. So he began a journey into learning about his own personal genetics. He wrote the book, The DNA Way, about his journey. It's a fantastic book. I really recommend it. It's not very long, but it is packed with incredible information. And with his experience in marketing, he formed a company called the DNA Company. And what they do is they run genetic tests which reveal certain predispositions, and everybody is a little bit different, of course, with their genetics. And through that, we can figure out what is the best way to move through life in terms of our physical, mental, and even spiritual health. It's a fascinating conversation. I mean, we are entering really the future of what I think medicine should be, which is great information and great solutions to issues. So let's get into it. This is KASHIF KHAN.
Good morning. It's so great. Is it KASHIF? KASHIF.
Yeah.
Oh, just like it. Okay.
I actually grew up as KASHIF, and I didn't know my name was KASHIF until I was like 15.
Oh.
And some guy was visiting from another country and said, that's not how you pronounce your name. And my parents were like, yeah, we just never told you.
Like, why not? It's not like a big secret. Why? How is that even a secret?
It's just,
we didn't want you to know, because why?
It's just phonetically, I guess that's how it's pronounced, Westernly, right? But the actual Arabic word is KASHIF.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, phonetically, when you look at the spelling, it should be KASHIF in English. But
Yeah.
KASHIF sounds kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to say that. But anyway, hi. Now we're not even talking about the topic, but it's fun stuff. We get a little humanity in here to start things off. A little regular, just social talk here first. So I've been reading your book, The DNA Way, and it is a mind-blowing piece of work that has really opened my eyes to something you refer to as precision medicine, which I found a fascinating idea, that we can look at the genetics of any particular individual and find things out, not only about their predisposition to certain ways of physical things, but emotional and what are sometimes treated as psychiatric issues, and they're biological, they're genetic. So this idea that we come in as a clean slate in a sense, and it's, and I know the nature nurture thing, but nature seems to be playing an amazingly huge part in how we react and how we behave. And your story is great. We'll get into that. So I'm just here just sort of telling the audience what you're probably going to tell them anyway. But I got so excited reading that book, and I've been talking to a guy at my yoga class about this upcoming interview, which is now, and we've been really talking about it. So go ahead and start out. Your story is so amazing and so powerful.
Yeah. So in terms of story, I don't actually come from the industry. And I think that's why I was able to uniquely understand how to use the tool of genetics. And so genetics is, here's a gene. It tells you got an 80% chance of Alzheimer's, good luck. That's kind of what genetics was. And what happened with me is I actually came from the marketing world. I helped startup companies grow. That's what I really enjoyed doing and what I loved. And I got really sick. So I had multiple chronic issues, 5, in fact, all at the same time. And the question I kept asking all these doctors that were giving me pills was, why? What did I do wrong? What did I eat wrong? What was I exposed to? It's a lack of sleep. And the answer consistently across these various doctors was, we don't do that here, right? It's kind of like, here's what it's called, and here's a pill you take. In different words, obviously, but it's like, there is no why. You have eczema, you have depression, you have gut issues. It's just, it happens. People get diseases. And so what I learned, fast forward many months of digging, and this is where a lot of true root cause medicine stories come from, is somebody just pushing the envelope on, like, my doctor's not giving me enough info, I'm going to figure this out myself. And then they end up healing themselves, and they end up healing the people around them, and it becomes a thing. And that's what happened with me, which is I found out through my genome that there was key genes just missing. It wasn't even about what version, what variant. And so what am I saying now? That your body is doing all these jobs. You said the biology, right? Here's all these little jobs that your body has to do, from making hormones to making chemicals to getting rid of chemicals to detoxifying to fighting inflammation. There's a lot of things going on constantly in response to whatever you're doing. Your genes instruct those jobs, how efficiently you do them. So if you have a bad version of a gene, I don't do this job so well. So it's not about a gene equals cancer or a gene equals Alzheimer's. It's more like a gene equals a bad job or a good job. And I can now start to interpret why I feel the way I feel if you put in between those two things my habits, my environment, my nutrition, my lifestyle. I don't do this job well. I expose myself to X. And now I got sick because my body wasn't able to cope with X. Whereas the guy sitting next to me doesn't have a problem with X because he does that job really, really well. So I learned it was really something so complex is actually very simple. And I healed myself. I don't have those chronic conditions anymore. I don't take pills anymore. I don't even get the common cold anymore. I've measured and actually reversed my biological age. You're able to measure certain markers inside that tell you how old you are biologically. And I'm 10 years younger than my actual age. So that led me to, the world needs this, and I handed the keys of my marketing business over to my business partner and said, it's yours, keep it, because I found my legacy. And I went from helping startups to creating one. And really for me, it's not about the business. I don't even run the business. Our team does. It's more like learn, teach, learn, teach, learn, teach. And every time we deal with someone, we're learning something new, putting it into our database, and people get better. And that's what we've been doing.
Folks, if you haven't read the book, The DNA Way, it explains it so profoundly and articulate. You're very articulate in how you explain it, and you incorporate your own story. I just want to ask you this about, I think it was you, right? You were told not to do cardiovascular exercise because you don't get rid of the toxins that build up when that, something like that, wasn't it like that, something? And I was like, that's just against, you got to work out, you got to get the heart pumping, I've always hated to run. I hate it. I can't stand it. It makes me feel like crap. Why is that? I'm lazy. I'm but it's not that. Now I'm seeing that's just not my thing. Whatever that means. That there's some scientific jargon. It's not my thing.
Well, That's the that's that line, that phrase is truly what we're saying to people is one size fits all doesn't work for most people. Trial and error is a painful waste of time. It's not my thing is a much better thing to know, or this is my thing, because then you start doing the right thing immediately. And even this completely counterintuitive statement of don't do cardiovascular activity because it's going to cause you cardiovascular disease. No medical practitioner can wrap their head around that. They're like, no, you got to run, you got to pump your heart. So what's going on there is when you're all of the cells in your body are constantly taking in oxygen and nutrition to create energy. You have 50 trillion cells that are all doing this all the time. Now, in that process of converting oxygen to energy, you create an oxidant. And an oxidant is a toxin, it's a free radical. There are genes around oxidation and antioxidation that are meant to be doing their job of when I convert oxygen into oxidant, I get rid of it. Now, once I get rid of it, meaning remove it from the cell and put it out into the blood, there's other genes that are supposed to instruct binding and finding all of those toxins and sending them to the liver to get rid of them. Your liver detoxifies your body. We also have to understand how you do that job. Now, if you are the person who has the suboptimal version of the SOD2 gene, it's called SOD2, that means you don't have this efficient clearance of oxidants from the cell. If you're also the person that is missing the GSTT1 gene, you're not clearing it from the cell, and the little that you're able to get out into the blood, you're also not clearing that, which means you're constantly, by getting into oxidation, by taking in a lot of oxygen, cardiovascular activity, for example, you're constantly creating this toxic insult that your body can't clear. That then causes inflammation. And where is it going to cause inflammation first is where it is. It's in your arteries, it's in your blood, pumping and flowing. And it's going to cause inflammation, for example, to your arteries around your heart. And we can actually genetically determine what quality of hardware you have. There's a gene called 9p21 that tells us, are your arteries stainless steel and resilient, or are they more paper thin and highly prone to inflammation? So if you do have this combo of bad oxidation, bad detox, bad hardware, and you have the habit of doing cardiovascular training, you're creating inflammation in your arterial system. Your body's response to that is to send cholesterol as a hormone to repair and reduce the inflammation. When the cholesterol meets the oxidation that caused the inflammation in the first place, it also oxidizes and it hardens and deposits. And then you get a disease called cholesterolemia. And all of a sudden your doctor's saying, hey, there's a level that's up. Chemical medicine is let's measure chemicals in your blood and give you another chemical to deal with it, right? You have cholesterolemia, you need to start taking a statin. Versus you have inflammation because of your habits. So now give me a 5-year-old child and I can map this out because your DNA never changes, or give me the person that's on a pill and I can explain to them why they're on it, as opposed to what their disease is called and how to mask it with a pill. So imagine what this does to longevity. Imagine what this does to the last 25, 30 years of your life being high quality versus paying hospital bills, right? Which is the American dream right now. So all of these things, we're saying, going back to the thing you said, remove the trial and error. One size fits all is not good enough. We now have the technology for you to know exactly what choice is best for you.
I have so many things I want to talk about. I don't know where to start first. Okay, here. This is so great. I'm like excited. I'm very excited. Okay, now I had some people on my show recently that really expounded and on the carnivore diet.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a lot of success. Both of these guys had a ton of success. One guy even cured his arthritic problems, and he's vibrant and he's healthy, and he was a hardcore vegetarian for many years.
Yep.
So he's been on both sides, if there is sides, and there is a very emotional piece to, the vegetarian thing in particular, like, how could you kill meat or whatever it is.
Yep.
That aside, is a carnivore diet for everyone? Is there, how do you use this to figure out not just supplements? Obviously, that is a kind of a cool thing. We'll talk about that, but what you eat and how you eat it. Because I'm fascinated with that. Do I want to become a carnivore? It just seems like too much cleanup after the meal.
There's two answers there. One is anybody that goes on a carnivore diet is going to feel better because there's two things happening. It's carnivore food, liver, meat, eggs, if you're getting good, proper pasture eggs. One of the few things left that isn't ultra processed foods. So in order to be a carnivore, you've eliminated all the processed foods. You've eliminated fructose, folic acid, all the things that are making you sick, linoleic acid, omega-6s. These are all the things that are insults to our body that are in our food. You're not getting any of that stuff. You're also getting a lot of folate, which because the cow eats greens and the folate that's in the greens is what your body needs, and we don't get it. Our food has folic acid, a synthetic version. So all of a sudden, everyone is going to heal from autoimmune conditions to migraines to everything. Now, the longitudinal question is, do I stay on this diet? Do I use it as a therapeutic tool to get better? And then what? So there are genes around the metabolism of fat, ApoA2. And if you don't have the efficient version of ApoA2 and you, for long-term, stay on a high-fat diet, 5, 6, 7 weeks into this carnivore diet, you're going to start to feel bad. You're going to start to get a little bit of brain fog, a little bit of weakness, low energy. Things are going to change. It feels really great to dump processed foods and to eat something clean. You're going to feel amazing. But if your body can't metabolize those nutrients you've taken in, including that heavy load of fat you're getting from red meat, it's going to start to struggle. We can also determine your insulin response. TCF7L2 is a gene that will tell you how efficiently your body manages insulin. Ultimately, when you're eating fat, and people don't think of it this way, when we think of insulin, we just think of sugar, right? Sugar gives me diabetes. Sugar makes my insulin spike. When you eat fat, it converts to glucose, sugar. And if you aren't an efficient converter, metabolizer of fat, and your insulin response is off, you'll get sick from fat, not just sugar. And particularly South Asians, Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, will actually have a constant insulin spike, just like a Western European does from sugar. And this is not discussed because it's a genetic, it's a unique to a specific population. It's not an overarching statement, And so you can get precise and you can know before you start, should I be a vegan? Should I be keto? Should I be carnivore? Am I more wired for something more paleo? Do carbs matter to me? Maybe I have the best version of the AMY1 gene and I can really efficiently use starches and carbs as fuel. I don't really need to worry about the low carb diet. It's more the chemicals processing around the carby foods that are the problem, not the carbs themselves. So short answer is yes. With your genome in hand on day one, you know exactly what to eat to be your best.
Amazing, because the trial and error that you were talking about is so confusing and painful for people. My wife has always struggled with eating issues, like where she eats certain things and then she can't stop.
Yeah.
And she was telling a friend about this, and she was telling her symptoms of how she eats something and then she just has to have more and more and more of it. And this woman said to her, "Oh, you're leptin resistant," which I'd never heard of. Neither had she. And we've been into the health food thing for a while. So she started taking the supplement of leptin after certain meals. And then she didn't have these unreasonably strong cravings. And it actually worked. So she discovered this was a trial and error thing, but she's struggled with this for a while. Now, I don't even know if that's the right thing to take, but it's working.
Right.
Let's put it, yeah.
So this is where what you just described is a perfect example of changing a habit to solve the problem. You don't actually have a problem. There's something in your environment, nutrition, or lifestyle that your body was not designed for, and all of a sudden it's leading to a problem. And if you had the right habit, you wouldn't have the problem. So in that case, there's probably other layers that we could nuance her story with to get her even more to where she wants to be. For example, there's some people that have the suboptimal version of the FTO gene. It's referred to as an obesity gene because it's very difficult for your gut to signal satiety to the brain. So you've eaten your food, the amount of calories you need, but you're not full, right? You're not hungry, but you're not full. And so you go for seconds, you go for thirds, and you overeat. It's just simply because the signal is slow. So you need to know that. You need to plate your food, have some water, and create the satiety. There's some people that have a suboptimal version of the MC4R gene, which is satiety of the palate. And now I'm full, I know I'm done, but I need that wow factor. I need those chips. I need those cookies. Right? I'm going to go graze at the pantry because I'm just not satisfied.
Yeah.
right? And this is actually a survival trait of our ancestors, because the trick for creating satiety is variety. You need soupy, salty, crunchy. The more flavors and textures, the faster your palate gets satisfied, and then you eat less. So this MC4R gene forces you to seek out variety as a way of surviving and getting more variable nutrition sources, right? So, and these are, we can keep going. There's a couple, and then there's also the neurochemicals of the brain. If I don't clear my dopamine on time, dopamine is the chemical that allows you to feel pleasure and reward. So if it takes me a long time to clear my dopamine, then when I am in a pleasure seeking experience, I get stuck, I binge. It's hard for me to turn it off because the clearance is so slow. I keep getting stuck in this loop of, oh, pleasure, 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 pleasure. And it keeps going and going and going. So any one of these things could be nuancing how she's feeling, but it was triggered by the health condition of I don't deal with leptins well.
It's fascinating because it's, I had that it was actually yesterday. We had this watermelon, and my wife goes, "Do you want some more?" I said, "My stomach doesn't, but my tongue does." I go, "It's delicious, but I'm full. I can't." But I sort of compromised and had just a tiny little piece, and just told my tongue, "This is it." But it's amazing the possibilities for, well, particularly in the world of addiction and depression and all these psychiatric things that are treated with therapy and drugs, and the idea that you have a disorder and that you're broken somehow. It really it will take a lot of the stigma out of these things, for one. And how do so I'm guessing you're combining the information with a certain type of doctors that you have with your company, the consultants. How does that work? Because I was interested in that piece of it, which if it's in the book, I didn't get to that part yet because I'm pretty deep in it, but I haven't gotten to the end.
Yeah, the book is really more me telling my story so people can understand how to think about their body differently. Whether or not you've had a test, at least you understand that here's what's really going on, right? And you can start making better choices. On terms of how we operate, one of the things, part of my mission, one was to interpret the genome better. There's a lot of pearls of wisdom in this genome that were not being extracted. Simple 2 or 3 things we just talked about. Most genetic companies won't tell you. There's one thing to sequence and get data. Great, I have a bunch of data. It's another thing to interpret it and apply it. What does it mean? What are the insights? Data is dumb. It's a bunch of information. Asking the right questions is what gives you the intelligence. And so that was step one. The second part of our mission, let's call it, is from my experience trying to use the genome to heal myself, it was too hard to use. Highly complex. It's a completely different language. You needed a PhD to interpret it for you. The reports didn't talk about my body or systems. They talked about genes. And I don't really need to know what gene I have. I need to know what's wrong and how do I fix it. It should be that simple. And so the other half of our mission was making it easy. And so the reports, to answer your question, speak to problems, anxiety, depression, weight loss, etc., as opposed to the DRD2 gene. Right now I have to go figure out how to apply that. But yes, we have a clinical team for people that need to go beyond, I'm trying to be the best version of myself. I'm trying to add 10 years to my life. I'm trying to have the best energy, best libido, whatever it is the goal is. But if there's a clinical issue, like my mom had breast cancer, I don't want that. Mm-hmm. There's dementia in my family, I'm avoiding that. Or I have prostate cancer right now. Please help me figure out the root cause. Yes, we have a clinical team for that purpose. There's certain things that just even regulatory wise can't say to a consumer. A clinician has to be in between, right? So for that purpose, we built this clinical team so that if someone needs help that their doctor can't give them because they haven't been trained on this knowledge base, we can do it for you.
So would you call them functional medicine doctors that you're using, nutritionists, or is it a combination of different disciplines, and do they work together?
It's a combination. So they're trained on functional genomics. So they're functional genomic practitioners. And we've trained everyone from medical doctors, oncologists, nutritionists, naturopaths, chiropractors, even personal trainers. We have a couple guys we work with that so that people can work on their fitness at a personalized level. So we've understood what all the major problems are people are trying to work on. So we brought in the right team to address them all.
Obviously, I've heard of genetics and genetic testing and all kinds of things, but I haven't seen any company that's brought this together in a way that is actually there's a practical use for an individual to improve their life. That's amazing. And your own story is a testament to that.
I've healed myself, cured myself. I've reversed my biological age, truly, which wasn't even a goal. It was more me using what we call epigenetics. Epigenetics is, so everything we've been talking about up until now is genetics. What version of what gene do I have? And how is that instructing some biological function? Too good or too bad, or as it should be. Epigenetics is, how is that gene expressing differently because of my inputs? So your genes are constantly turning the dials on how efficiently they work based on what you ate, what you're exposed to, how scared you are. And this is why you think of something scary and there's an instant adrenaline thing. You know, somebody scares you and you feel like a feeling in your gut, your body reacts to everything constantly to give you the best of what you need for that situation. So that's epigenetics, and you're able to use epigenetics to try and understand how old you are on the inside. And when we started this journey, I was 38, so when I was still sick trying to fix myself, and my biological age was tested as 43. So I had already added a number of years to my life because of how sick I was and not understanding how to maintain this thing that I walk around in, right? Now I actually am 43. It's been a few years. And my biological age is tested as 33. And so not only have I stopped my conditions in their tracks, I reversed them. I am the best shape of my life and I don't get sick anymore. I've also reversed time and I've given myself an extra decade. You know, it could have been a very different story if I just kept down the path of chronic disease and, you know, in the next 10 years, perhaps not been able to work, you know, been taking various medications. My kids, I can't play with my grandchildren because I'm sick all the time, versus 90 years old and skydiving and riding my bicycle, right?
Yeah. Well, and also the day-to-day quality. I mean, if you got headaches and brain fog and listlessness, I mean, that is just a crappy way to live.
Yep.
And so it's not just even about longevity. It's about, enjoying every day that you have right now, which is truly, you know, it's literally, it's a scientific biological thing, but it's also a spiritual thing that you are doing, in my opinion, that you can allow someone to live this full life without the burden of not knowing why things are going south in certain areas.
Speaking of spiritual, going to derail the conversation a little bit and go.
Great, I love derailing. Let's go.
I'm constantly learning daily, right? I'm never going to stop learning because, first of all, it's so fascinating. And second, people around you getting better is an amazing place to be, right? That the impact. So I went from a profit-driven entrepreneur to an impact-driven eternal student. And the business is a byproduct. It's just kind of automatic now, right? So what did I learn? I feel like since I've become healthy, that I'm more spiritually connected. And not that I always had religious beliefs, but my level of connection and the being in the forefront was not there, right? So what happened? What did I learn is really cool stuff about our hardware. If you look at your DNA, everyone has pictured that kind of ladder that's twisted. That's what your DNA looks like, a spiral, right? So there's these two sidebars, and then there's these rungs in between. So the point where those rungs meet the sidebars are actual receptor sites. So your DNA is constantly signaling out into the field around you your thoughts. Your mitochondria, which is in your cells also, your DNA is in your cells, and so is the mitochondria. We think of your mitochondria as this energy production hub of the cell. This is where, when I said earlier that the oxygen and nutrition come in to create energy, that's done at the mitochondria. So it's like this little factory that makes energy for you. it's also a receptor site for external signals. So the reason why you know there's somebody walking up behind me, right? Or the reason why you know the lights just got a bit dimmer, your mitochondria is constantly looking for cues to signal to you it's time to make a change. And it's not just what you can see and smell and taste. It's like literally through the field. That's why you can kind of sense somebody coming behind you. So your mitochondria is receiving information and your DNA is putting out information. Now, in order to do this and use words like manifest or pray or signal, and communicate beyond language and body, but it's like through thought, which we now know is true in quantum physics, right? The tool that does it for you is your DNA. If you're in a chronic disease state and you're aging, it's because you caused oxidation and damage to your DNA. The cells are now inflamed. So that signaling tool doesn't work. So when I was unhealthy and my cells were in inflammation, which is why I had 5 chronic conditions, the DNA was also oxidized and damaged, which is why, the cells got inflamed. It's that whole sort of cascade. And then I reversed it. I got rid of the inflammation and I healed myself, and I'm now stronger than I've ever been. Repair was done. That oxidation is gone. My cells, my DNA are now thriving, which is my biological age is reversed. I now sense that what I want falls in my lap, right? When what is best for whatever's going on is easy to get, because not only have I healed myself physically in the context of disease and longevity, I've also healed myself spiritually. And the connection that I needed, the actual hardware that does it for me, has been repaired. And why am I putting time into this? Because if you want what you want from your life and your relationships, it requires this field level of communication. And if you're not healthy, you can't get it because the radio is broken. The receiver is broken. You truly cannot send out and receive signals because you've broken the hardware. So it's a major decision to not take care of your body and not stay healthy. You truly cannot pray. You cannot connect with the universe. You cannot understand what's happening around you. All of these miracles that are built into our cellular structure are no longer available to you.
Yeah, it keeps coming up in this show. The two things that constantly come up are inflammation on the biological side and trauma as big effects on people. And trauma is now, what I'm finding in some of the episodes that I'm doing, is that's also can be biological, or there could be a biological manifestation of a emotional trauma in the body. It's unbelievable that like extra nerve endings grow in certain areas and certain parts of the brain are affected. And what you're saying is that, yeah, that's all, that we can take a look at those things, alter what we're putting in and what we're doing during the day, and not have those things be as a problem, or at least as great of a problem, for sure.
Yeah. So to speak to both of those, of the 15 top killers in the US, disease-centric killers, 14 are rooted in inflammation. So if you don't have inflammation, you cannot get 14 of the top diseases that kill you, that take American lives. The 15th, by the way, which is actually the number 3 cause of death in the US right now, is medical error. So doctors just screwing up. And that also doesn't happen without inflammation, because that's why you went to the doctor, because you were sick, right? So all in all, it's just this Russian roulette of, I've caused myself inflammation because of my diet, exercise, lifestyle, environmental choices. So something entered my body that caused an insult, whether it's trauma, pain, relationships, food, etc. I now have inflammation. Now, which disease do I get? That's just the genetic lottery of, for example, we said we can determine you have bad arterial hardware. Okay, we can also determine you make too many toxic hormones, so maybe you'll get breast cancer. We can also determine that you don't transport lipids properly, so maybe you'll get dementia because you have Alzheimer's plaque buildup in the brain. So now it's a question of inflammation leads to a terrain where disease is possible. Which disease? It's just playing the cards of what cards you've been dealt, and you're going to get one. So Eliminate inflammation, top diseases cannot happen. You're just giving yourself life, right? And then the other part about trauma, we can actually determine someone's genetic propensity towards binding negative stimulus and trauma. So there's the adrenaline response is what causes trauma to happen. And the way you metabolize your adrenaline determines whether it's an in-moment emotional experience or if it's imprinted as a memory. And there's genes that determine this. And if it's imprinted as a memory, what is trauma? The next time something reminds me of this, I feel exactly what I felt on that time. And I'm using that as my driver and decision maker. And the challenge with this is there's also genes that clear noradrenaline. And so you may clear very quickly or you may clear very slowly. So there's some people that clear very quickly and they remember the feeling, but they're confused about the information. And they're constantly struggling and friction and fighting because you said this, you did this. Like, no, that's not what happened. They remember the feelings. They know how important it was, but they can't remember the facts. And so that causes a lot of friction. Then there's a person who has a very slow neurochemical clearance that remembers a little too much. And that's where you get true PTSD. I remember the feeling and I remember every little detail, and I can never walk down that street again. I can never see that person frown again. I can never smell that smell again, whatever the trigger is that brings back that feeling. So yes, it's a major contributor to chronic disease because, again, your epigenome, your genes are expressing to manage what they think your body is being exposed to. So if you are that person that holds on and binds and imprints the trauma and you keep bringing it back, then your genes are going to keep saying, oh, this is chronic. This is all the time. I need to do my jobs like this. And those jobs be done like this are probably too much, which leads to inflammation and leads to disease, as opposed to let me heal the trauma so that my genes can calm down and not give me what I'm not even needing, right? And not cause this, metabolic disaster. And this is why it equals that.
When you talk about healing the trauma, what, I mean, we're going a little bit off of the sort of hard sciencey thing into some emotional stuff. And how are you guys seeing that being best dealt with?
So there isn't a single person that we deal with at the clinical level, whether they came in for breast cancer or hair loss or weight loss, there isn't one person that isn't wowed and doesn't have a major eureka moment when we talk about their brain and their mood and behavior. Everybody has something that they need dealing with when it comes to their mental health. Is it a 2% problem or a 90% problem? So every single person, we always start there. And when it comes to things like trauma, burnout, depression, addiction, a majority of those problems that we see get resolved just from the awareness of somebody now learning how their brain works, right? So when they have that aha moment of, oh, my brain binds trauma more than the people around me, I imprint. So now it's just a context question. If I'm in a context where there's constant trauma, I'm going to have a constant burden. And if I'm in a context where there's a constant reminder of the trauma, I'm going to be constantly feeling horrible. Versus this also means I have deep emotional intelligence. It also means I have empathy. It also means I can read the room and know what people are thinking, right? So if I'm in that context where I'm a clinician or I'm a healer or I'm a coach or I'm a parent, all of a sudden the same thing that was your crutch becomes your superpower. And this is what we teach people, that the way you feel, you weren't born like that, right? You weren't born in trauma. You weren't born with depression. So I should point out, disclaimer, there are some people that have an innate genetic issue or chemical imbalance that have depression. They have anxiety. They actually have a condition. That is a tiny fraction of the people that are saying they have the condition. The majority of people will do that. Why do you have something like post-COVID, there's a mental health crisis, right? That means pre-COVID, those people didn't have a mental health problem. So they didn't have it. It was caused. It was caused in their genome driving neurochemical processes to various levels, now being put in the wrong context. I can't see my family. I'm eating garbage food all day. My gut is in bad condition. I don't go outside anymore and get vitamin D. So the inputs have changed, which is now equal. Here's how I feel. So change the inputs, and you won't feel like that. Or change the context. So to answer your question, there isn't a person we deal with where their mood and behavior issues aren't dealt with when they have that aha moment of, this is how my brain works. Now I know, here's the context where I thrive. Here's the context that's my kryptonite. And it's going to make me feel horrible. And I need to do more of this. I now know this thing that makes me feel horrible is actually my superpower. I was wired to do something great. I'm just not using my tool. I'm taking my Ferrari off-roading and wondering why it doesn't work.
And the one thing that this does is one of the things this does is it ups our level of compassion for other people, because you see they're not doing it to you or because they want to, or they're weak, or they're, got some disorder. It literally is a biological thing in a lot of these cases where people are behaving a certain way because of their biology.
Yeah, exactly.
And I find, and we talked a little bit about this before we started recording, in terms of relationships with other people, those can be very difficult because people aren't going by the same set of biological responses in interactions. I was talking to a friend of mine actually 2 days ago about somebody that we both know. I said, do you get the feeling that he's always ready to go to the next thing and he isn't present?
Yeah.
And he goes, absolutely. I go, I have a hard time having a relationship with this guy because he's not. And he goes, oh, and so-and-so's like that too. And there was another example. I go, you're right. They're both like that. They're always on to the next thing, so you don't have them present. Now, I would say psychologically, they're afraid of intimacy. That's what I would say. So they're doing that. But now we have a whole other way to look at it.
Yes, that we've seen that. And that's the trait that drives that is this fast neurochemical clearance. So the squirrel effect, the next shiny object, right? And so there's a gene called COMT, which clears your dopamine and your noradrenaline. Dopamine is what powers your pleasure and reward. Eat some tasty food, get some pleasure. Reward is achieving something, which is one of the biggest drivers that makes us do whatever we do. The reason we have whatever we have when you look out your door is because dopamine powered the need to get more, right? So if you clear the neurochemical too fast, which is some people, you all of a sudden adopt this reward-seeking behavior that I need the next hit because I'm done with the last one. And I wasn't in that state for long enough.
Yeah.
So, we're sitting there eating our food and we're supposed to enjoy our meal, but it's like, where are we getting dessert? Right? What time is the movie? Because the neurochemicals clear so fast, they can't stay in the moment. So again, context. The context of trying to sit there with friends for 2 hours and do something is going to be tricky and difficult. The context of being an entrepreneur and that frontline warrior who's willing to take the risks and do things that other people won't do, superpower. So it's a context question. And now, taking a step further, if you have misalignment in terms of here's the context, and this is why I feel bad in this context, you now have two choices. You remove that, or you add something, supplement, food, exercise, to allow you to do what you want to do. So you still need to be able to go to that 2-hour dinner and sit there and just deal with it. And so there's things you can do to boost your dopamine levels, like L-theanine is a supplement that allows you to have more dopamine so that you can be in that state for longer. There's, cold therapy, cold exposure, just walking outdoor without a jacket. You'll find, I don't know if this sounds like your friend, but people that don't have access to enough dopamine often prefer the cold. They don't like heat. Right? It's because what it does with neurochemicals, it drives the dopamine levels up because it gives you that warrior state. So the question becomes, what am I trying to do right now? How is my genome aligned or misaligned to that thing? And what do I need to put in between in terms of my environment, nutrition, and lifestyle to do that thing? Or do I just acknowledge that that's not for me? I'm not wired for that and it's going to make me bad. Whether it's a food, whether it's an exercise, whether it's people, whatever. This is how you can think about your body to always make the right choice.
Well, interestingly enough, both of these people that I was talking about they're sober, but they're both alcoholic addicts. They're sober,
Right.
but that is, are they looking for a dopamine hit somewhere down the road that they're not getting in that moment? It's kind of really what it is. This moment isn't good enough. I don't feel that great, even though I like you and we're having a nice conversation. There's got to be, where's the next thing?
Yeah. Yeah. And that the addiction. So when you have, so like we only talked about half of the story, which is clearance. There's also binding. So the DRD2 gene determines how dense the receptors are in your brain to actually experience dopamine. So if you have what it sounds like your friends have, which is the fast clearance, so it doesn't last long enough, but you also have the low binding because your receptors aren't, so you don't actually feel it at an intensity level that gives you satisfaction. You got three outcomes: depression, world sucks, I can't feel and it doesn't last long enough; addiction, because I find something that gives me that elevated sense of pleasure and I now structure my day around it. I have to do it to not be frustrated and angry; or achievement, because dopamine also powers reward. And you can get satisfaction from pleasure or reward. You don't need both. So you could go down that route of like, I achieved something yesterday and I'm going to achieve more and I'm going to achieve more. And this is why you often find that high achievement people are prone to addiction and they're prone to depression and they're prone to suicide. How many times have you seen a celebrity kill themselves? And you think, if I had that person's life, I would not take my life. They may have lost a recent contract. They may have seen somebody steal from them. They may have something that they're used to being good was taken away. And for them, that crash is way down here. Right.
Yeah. You see that in a lot of fields too, like even, politics. Somebody hits a very high level in their political career, then all of a sudden, everybody finds out they're, cheating on their wives and they're sex addicts, or they're, addicted to something, or it's just, you're like, why would this guy who has everything, ruin it? Well, it wasn't really like, I think I'm going to ruin it all. It's more like, I have to.
Yeah. Can't get no satisfaction. That's what it is.
Boy, we're interesting creatures, aren't we?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. When I think about when I think about an animal that gets scared and traumatized, they're almost gonna be eaten, and they get away and they're not eaten. And so they survived. Are they walking around constantly thinking they're going to be eaten? No, they aren't thinking that. It's gone. That thing is gone. They had the moment. Their body reacted properly for survival, and then they got rid of it, and they're enjoying the rest of the day. And that's where a lot of people can't do that.
We can now predict who can do that and who can't. Right. So it's very easy to predict genetically who's going to move on and who's not. So who feels the trauma, who stays in the moment too long, who gives things too much meaning. There's a gene called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, which speaks to neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to develop new neural pathways. And so clinically, it's looked at for concussion. If I get a concussion and if I don't have good BDNF, then I don't do a good job of repair, developing new neural pathways. But it also speaks to mood. And these people give stuff a lot of meaning. So that's another person who just can't let it go. Versus I have the really good BDNF, so something really bad can happen to me, but I'm not going to be a drama queen. I'll just move on. So those traits, now you have this neural map. You understand how your brain creates, binds, clears neurochemicals. You can predict your behavior to a T. I don't need to speak to somebody if I have their DNA to tell you their personality with precision, probably beyond how well they know themselves. Because the genes don't lie and neurochemicals don't lie.
Well, this is revolutionizing the whole medical field, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that are upset about that. It's the idea of, if in order for change to happen, the previous generation has to die off because they're going to fight it too hard.
Yeah.
Well, when you think about literally, I was thinking about what are the benefits. Obviously, are very obvious to me. Some of the roadblocks might be, in particular, I was just thinking about insurance companies might use it to deny people healthcare in certain areas. Oh, you're genetically predisposed to cardiovascular disease, so we're not going to cover you for that.
Yeah.
And that would be a misuse of the information. And it's also a testament to making a single payer insurance the way to go. So everyone has it. Everyone's being, analyzed and properly, and then and if they follow the protocols that are suggested, then, it's going to up the ability for healthcare people and clinicians and all those people to do their jobs better.
Yeah, I agree that this is where, so what you're saying is already happened, which is deny or, force them to do certain things. But that's, again, an obsolete way to look at genetics. You have a risk for disease, we're going to deny you. No, it's more like you have poor biological function. And as an insurance company, I'm telling you, adopt these habits so that you live longer. So everything is at the pharma level is thought disease centric.
Yeah.
Right. And so what we should think is more health centric, as opposed to how to deal with the disease that's coming. How do I just hold on to the health that I have? I have it. It's here. Just teach me how to not get sick. And one of the big challenges is we're living longer than ever. It's no longer dying at 35 like our ancestors. We lived into our 80s or 90s. And so we have this extra time, but we haven't been taught how to hold on to our health and bring it into that extra time. So we know we're healthy in our 20s and 30s for the most part. We don't know how to extend that. So what habits do we adopt in today's reality where we're living to 80? There's different things we need to do. There's maintenance required. And this is why the average American gets their first chronic disease at 55. They have 2 by 65. And the last 15 years of their life are spent in treatment. That's the average. 66% of American personal bankruptcies are rooted in healthcare costs. Right. So it's like you work your whole life to build it and then you give it up to your disease.
So there's a financial incentive for those of you who don't think that that's a piece of it, because it's a huge piece of it. Boy, the money you save on the back end by doing some of the things on the front end is enormous. It's and that's not even mentioning quality of living.
We're talking about a $4 trillion industry, and there's not many industries where you can use a T. So it's a $4 trillion industry, of which 90%, this is according to the CDC, 90% of that spend, 3.6 trillion, is on chronic disease management, meaning stuff that you don't have to have, that is caused by your choices. So 90% of what we're dealing with and suffering from, we think we have, like, oh, I have diabetes in my family, I have breast cancer in my family. No, you have some failed biological function in your family for which, if you were to eat like this, yes, you're more likely to get diabetes than somebody that doesn't have that bad biological function, but you still have to eat like that to cause it. You weren't born with diabetes. Why does it happen when you're 50 and not 12?
Yeah.
You caused it. So now know that there's a genetic suboptimal ability in some job in your body. And if you focus on prioritizing that job, you're not getting the disease. It won't happen. And I know this because we've reversed disease. We've taken diabetic people off of insulin. We've taken people with cholesterolemia off of statins and Lipitor. If you can reverse it, then you surely can prevent it.
It's an interesting worldview that a lot of people have, which is, I live in a hostile universe that's constantly trying to attack me, and I have to, keep my eye out for these things that are coming to get me.
Yeah.
I don't go outside when it's cold outside because I don't want to get sick.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. It's a complete shift in the way that we look at the universe. Even it's this hostile universe trying to get me, but when it's actually it's really about personal responsibility in order to have optimal physical, mental, and spiritual health. Is what really it comes down to. That
the perception, like what you just said, I won't go outside in the cold because I don't want to get sick, versus in Denmark, oh, great, it's cold outside. Let's put our babies outside while we have some coffee to build their immune system so they don't get sick. This is what they do. They literally will take their baby in a stroller and park it outside in the middle of winter, and they're excited because that's the thing they're waiting for to build their child's immune system. And they will sit in a cafe. It's a common thing. You'll see people sitting there sipping their coffee while there's a bunch of strollers parked outside in the middle of the winter. So it's the same thing. It's cold, right? The difference is, if you're not metabolically healthy, like the average American who eats garbage, then your body's not ready to get the benefit of the cold. because it can't handle the viruses that are brought in when your immune system is suppressed from the cold. So it's your choices that got you there. It's not the cold itself.
Well, somebody did that here, the child services would show up.
Yeah.
They'd be in huge trouble. What are you doing?
Yeah.
I'm trying to build the kid's immune system. No, you're a negligent parent, and we're taking the kid from you.
Yeah.
So funny. I want to talk about the specifics of your company. I want to say, okay, I'm a guy I'm looking at 70 from where I am right now. I'm 69. I don't take any medications, none. So I've been doing something right. I do have some issues, but I want to come to you. I want to get I want to get the test. How do I do that? What does it cost? And then what about beyond, some, maybe is that cost included in the clinical meeting with people and designing a protocol? How would that work if I wanted the full buffet?
We designed this in the way that I wished it was when I was sick. The test itself is not designed to tell you about your genes, it's designed to tell you how to deal with your problems. So there's a separate section for each problem: anxiety, depression, and then there's recommendations for each. So you don't need to go fix everything, go fix the thing that's the priority. So that's one. Second thing is, what I wished I had when I got my DNA data was somebody to tell me what it all means. And that's the most difficult part, because it's very hard for us to take the IP that we have and train and teach people. Doctors don't know what we know. Even geneticists don't know what we know. They don't even understand that this is what's possible for the genome. And so we created these report review sessions, which I think is the most valuable part of the experience. I have my data, I have my reports. Now I'm going to show up for 4 2-hour calls that are deep dives into all the systems of the body, so I can learn how to use this data. And guess what? My DNA doesn't change. I bought this test, but in 10 years, when I have different problems to solve, I can go back to the same data to ask different questions. A 12-year-old girl who's just getting into puberty versus trying to get into fertility versus dealing with menopause, very different realities, but the same data can help you guide each one of those. Mm-hmm. So that's why we do these report review sessions where you come with your data. There's up to 8 hours of time you can spend with us, which is far beyond any, let me book a consult with a doctor. And that's all included in there. And we do it as a group. As many people as want to show up, live Q&A, ask your questions. I just did one last night. There was about 100 people on there. And, they were all asking their questions. Everybody got all the answers they needed. And they were all blown away by what they learned, right? Last night we were talking about sleep, how to fix your sleep. So that's that. Now, for someone that has a clinical issue, whether you have a problem you're dealing with now, or whether there's something hereditary that you're trying to prevent, that's where we have clinical programs. And the clinical programs range from, let's just solve your problem, spend a couple of weeks together, all the way to 3, 4, 5 month deep dives where we're truly mining everything we can find in your genome and working with you side by side to implement it all also. So executives, athletes, even just health enthusiasts want to dive deeper, and they can do that in that context. So you asked about pricing. So the test itself is $499, so it's $500. The programs are just how much you're going to spend. We have people with a few hours, people that are spending a few months, and obviously doctors, naturopaths, people understand what those rates are. The question of how much time you need. And that's what it all looks like. So now, in this one $500 investment, you are going to learn everything about how your body works to answer every question you're ever going to have in the future, because the data is available to you to reuse. And we also, as we learn more about the genome, we keep updating it. So if you come back to us in a year, you're going to learn something that you didn't learn today, and there's no extra cost. You just keep learning. Then you show up with that data to 8 hours of live report review session, as much or as little as you want to attend. It is going to completely change your life. That I can assure you. Anyone that has gone through the process is like, this is foundational. This is the first thing I should have done, because now I know how to choose between everything else I'm working on.
That's, I was telling my buddy before this interview, I said, oh, they do this genetic test, because I went on the website, which is very clear. By the way, And he goes, well, what does it cost? And I said, $500. He goes, that's really a good price. He goes, that's great. I go, it is. When you think about the knowledge, I mean, how many lattes is that? It's not that many. It's 100 lattes. You'll go through that in a couple of years.
And I can tell you that similar products are usually in the thousands. So other companies that do what we do charge a lot more. In fact, I just dealt with a patient who has Lyme disease, and her insurance company paid $30,000 for a genetic program that's similar to what we do, and she still didn't get the answer she needed. We actually fixed it for her. So genetic tests you can buy for $100, $200 online.
Yeah.
But they are genetic tests. Here's what this gene means, and here's what version you have. It's not data mining and insighting for you, or insightful for you, which is what we call functional genomics. Just like medicine is, here's what your disease is called, and here's what pill you need to take. Functional medicine is, let's figure out why you got sick.
Yeah.
That's the difference between what we do, functional genomics versus genetics. Genetics says, here's what gene you have, is what it means. Functional genomics says, let's use your genome to make sure you never get a disease and you age slower. So you have to test 4 different times as opposed to 1, because we're looking for a more comprehensive variance, but you get a much higher quality experience.
Can't even tell you how happy this is making me. I'm so it's almost like when I think about the old Star Trek show, and they'd run a scanner over the person, they knew everything about them. It's not quite that quickly, but it is similar. And then when you think about adding in some of the informational data things with that AI is providing, that's a whole other thing. But that literally you could go to anybody in any part of the world, and if you have this information and it's run through, even a program or not even a program, but that where all this information is there, you're good to go no matter where you are and what is going on. It's just incredible that it is really, it's futuristic, but now.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're right on. It's this virtual scan of every biological process in your body. It's not a wand that you wave, right? In Star Trek, it's a test that we do.
Yeah.
And to try and get to that same goal, if we just scanned all of the jobs that your body does, and here's the ones you need to prioritize, these are the ones that are going to be a problem. That's kind of what we do.
This is just a personal question for me. I have a genetic condition. It's not I wouldn't call it, well, I guess it's chronic, but it's there, and it's slightly progressing, but it's super annoying. And it is it's called rod cone dystrophy. It's an eye issue. They've narrowed it down to something called the EYS gene. It's very common in Japanese culture, Ashkenazi Jews. There's tendencies for certain genetic predispositions. Now, what I'm told, and I've been trying to find more information about it. There's very little. That what we're waiting for is some kind of stem cell therapy is the only way to help that. Now, people that are born with genetic things, can some of that be mitigated? Can none of it be mitigated? How is it done? That fascinates me because I actually have something.
So that's where what you just described, a genetic condition, you were born with it. This is what geneticists think genetics is for. And I agree with them in terms of what they do. That they do a really good job of isolating a gene and figuring out why a switch was turned on or off and it equals a problem. That's all true. So none of that applies to chronic disease, aging, performance, sports, diet, all that stuff. But in your context, yes, the answer now becomes, I need a therapy that's going to turn that gene off or turn it on, depending what the problem is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's yes, stem cells help, but really what we're getting to is genetic therapeutics, CRISPR technology. And there's companies that are now doing this, which is the therapeutic. I'm going to take that gene that's not functioning, and I'm going to splice, edit, and replace the broken section so that the gene starts functioning properly. Now your body's receiving a different instruction, and that genetic condition goes away.
Yes.
The last part of your question, there's still value to the other stuff, which is, I have this genetic condition, I have this problem, but is it expressing as a 2 out of 10 or is it expressing as a 9 out of 10? I fit. How bad is it? Now that goes to everything else. How inflamed is my body? How well do I detoxify? How well are my hormones firing right now? If all that stuff is doing its best, then this 8 out of 10 becomes a 2 out of 10, but it doesn't go away.
That's great. So that does help me a lot in terms of, what is it expressing itself stronger than it needs to?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there things that I can do? I just want to ask you about one more thing. This is a friend of mine has tinnitus or tinnitus. How, the debate on how to say that is ongoing and unimportant, but I've read so many different things about it, and he's, tried a few things and nothing has worked. And he said it's driving him. Sometimes it drives him crazy. And he goes, I actually thought about killing myself because it's so annoying sometimes. He's not going to do that. But, he said it's just, and is it inflammation? Is it physical damage because of loud music? Is it, what is it? Because it seems like something that, you're not born with it. He wasn't born with it. And all of a sudden, he's in his, I guess he got it in his 50s, something like that. And that seems to me like something that a genetic test would help almost immediately.
So you just described a case study of exactly what we've been talking about the past hour, which is he was not born with it. He doesn't have it. He made the wrong choices. He caused himself inflammation. Now, which disease got expressed? Cancer versus cardiovascular disease versus Alzheimer's versus tinnitus is just a combination of his inflammation plus his bad hardware. Where does it trigger first, right? And bad hardware could be because he damaged his ears previously, or he was just born with not the best hardware. So the short answer is the same thing is true of all of these chronic conditions. Get rid of the inflammation and the thing cannot manifest. He may still have the damaged ear material. He may still have may be born with not the best, but it doesn't mean it's expressing a condition because the first 50 years of his life, it didn't. And like I was saying earlier, most people get their first chronic condition at 55 because two things happen. You've built up that inflammatory load so high that it finally crosses the threshold to disease. And second thing is you lose your mitochondria. So as you age, especially post 50 years old, your mitochondria deplete and the cells become less resilient. So the thing that they were able to fight up until then, they can no longer fight.
Okay. It
was always there. You start losing the battle. So those are the answers. And I think if he works on inflammation and mitochondrial strength and resilience, he should potentially be able to reverse it.
Well, I'm going to talk to him about it.
Genetics will just tell him why he has inflammation and what specifically to focus on. Like instead of all this trial and error, it's like, go do this and go remove this. These are the things that are causing your inflammation, and your inflammation should go down.
Well, I don't need to do any more episodes. I'm shutting down the podcast after this. Give our answers. I want to thank you so much, folks. The DNA Way is the book. The DNA Company is the company where you can have your genetics tested and find solutions to issues and prevention. All those wonderful things. Kashif Khan, here he is. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And also, praise for the amazing work.
Yes, sir. Pleasure. And thank you. Great being here.
Thank you.
Much appreciation for you folks listening to The Exploding Human. The website is theexplodinghuman.com. The YouTube channel is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Once again, I want to thank Kashif Khan. Please go to thednacompany.com and check out what they have to offer. Get a copy of his book if you want more information. Have a fantastic day.